aware of the fact that state agencies actually have to notify the authors of bills for regulations that a state agency engages in a rulemaking project over? Yeah, so executive branch state agencies are actually required by state statute to notify state legislators about rulemaking projects related to that legislator's bill. The California Government Code contains the APA, the Administrative Procedure Act. It also imposes a number of duties and responsibilities on California state agencies, which includes departments and boards and commissions and other regulatory entities. In particular, the Government Code requires these state agencies to take specified actions when they engage in rulemaking activities. So, for example, in Government Code section 11017.5, it provides that when a statute is enacted that establishes a new program or requires interpretation pursuant to the APA, the state agency responsible for that program or the regulatory action is required 6 months after the operative date or the effective date of the statute, whichever comes later, to issue what it says is a clear and concise summary of the actions taken to implement that statute. And that has to be given to the author of the statute. In addition to the bill's author, the state agency must also issue that same summary to the policy committees in each house of the legislature that considered the statute. And if the statute was considered by the fiscal committee, then it has to go to the Joint Legislative Budget Committee, as well as to the fiscal committee of each house that actually considered that statute. Moreover, in Government Code section 11017.5, it requires state agencies responsible for the program or the regulatory action to send copies of all the regulations proposed to implement the statute, as well as a notice of any hearings held on those regulations before the hearings are actually held, of course, to the author of that state statute, so long as the author's a current member of the legislature. Now, these provisions have been in California law since 1981. It raises the question with me whether those 200 plus state agencies and departments comply with all of these provisions of the Government Code. I also want to bring to your attention Government Code section 11017.6, which requires every state agency responsible for implementing a statute which requires interpretation under the APA to prepare by January 30th of each year a rulemaking calendar for that year. Now, that rulemaking calendar consists of two schedules, one which describes the rulemaking necessary to implement statutes enacted during the prior year, and then the other schedule describes all other rulemaking that the agency plans to propose or to implement or interpret other statutes that were enacted during prior years. In addition to publishing that rulemaking calendar in the California Regulatory Notice Register, state agencies also are required to send that calendar to the author of each statute enacted during the previous year for which that agency has responsibility, together with an explanation of the priority that the agency is giving that statute in the rulemaking calendar.